Ayanda Mwale was the kind of woman who made everyone in the village smile. She taught little children under the big baobab tree, using chalk and stories to light up young minds. Her voice was soft, but her heart was strong. People would say, "That girl Ayanda, she was born with light in her spirit." She wasn't rich, but her kindness was wealth enough, and even the elders respected her for the way she carried herself with quiet dignity. Then there was Tajiri Okonkwo, the village's most eligible bachelor, tall, well-mannered, and the son of a powerful family. Yet, despite having women from wealthy homes lining up to catch his eye, his heart only beat for Ayanda. They met one morning when she was helping a child who had scraped his knee. Tajiri saw how gently she cared for the boy, and in that moment, he knew this was the woman he would marry. Their love blossomed slowly, like the first rain after a long dry season. Tajiri would bring her roasted maize after class. Ayanda would cook for his mother, trying her best to win her heart. Though his mother stayed distant, the village whispered blessings. The ancestors smile upon them, one elder said. Their bond felt pure, destined, like something written long before they were born. When Tajiri finally announced their engagement, joy spread through Mbenga like wildfire. Women began preparing their gale cloths. The local drummers started rehearsing. Children sang songs about Teacher Ayanda's big day. It felt like the whole village had claimed their love story as their own, waiting breathlessly for a wedding that promised to be the union of not just two hearts, but two worlds. Mama Aziza was a woman known all across Mbenga, not just because of her husband's wealth or her family's influence, but because of her sharp tongue and unshakable pride. She carried herself like royalty, always in the finest fabrics, with her head wrap tied high and her chin even higher. People respected her, but they also feared her. No one dared to challenge her views, not even her own son Tajiri. To Mama Aziza, appearances, bloodline, and tradition were everything. She had always believed that her son would marry a girl from a family as respected and established as their own, someone whose father owned land, whose lineage held status, and whose last name echoed history. So when Tajiri brought Ayanda home, Mama Aziza's heart didn't soften. Her eyes scanned Ayanda like a hawk. She saw the gentle smile, the humble dress, the soft voice. But none of that impressed her. All Mama Aziza saw was the daughter of a poor widow who owned nothing but her honesty. Ayanda's father had died when she was a child, leaving her mother to raise her alone with barely enough to survive. To Mama Aziza, that wasn't a story of strength. It was a stain. She couldn't understand why her son, her only child, would choose someone from such a modest background when he could have had any girl in the village, or even from the city. She didn't say much that day, but Ayanda could feel the coldness in the way Mama Aziza looked at her. It was as if her presence in the house was something to be tolerated, not welcomed. Even when Ayanda tried to help in the kitchen or serve her tea with respect, Mama Aziza would offer tight-lipped smiles and short responses. To everyone else, Ayanda was a treasure, kind, smart, and humble. But to Mama Aziza, she was invisible. Behind closed doors, Mama Aziza warned Tajiri. She told him this marriage would bring shame to the Okonkwo name. She said, "How can you marry a girl whose mother has nothing? A girl who comes from a line of suffering?" Tajiri tried to reason with her, tried to tell her that Ayanda's spirit was worth more than gold. But Mama Aziza didn't want to hear it. In her mind, love was not enough to build a family. It needed foundation, and Ayanda's foundation, in her eyes, was too weak. The more Tajiri defended Ayanda, the more determined Mama Aziza became to end the relationship. She started speaking to elders, hinting that the engagement wasn't final. She told distant relatives that her son was confused, that he would come to his senses. Her words spread like quiet poison. People began to wonder if the wedding would even happen. Some whispered that Mama Aziza had a girl already picked out for Tajiri, the daughter of a powerful merchant, someone more suitable. But Ayanda never complained. Even as she felt the weight of Mama Aziza's disapproval, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity she always had. She smiled, she greeted with respect, and she never let bitterness show. Deep down, though, she could feel that storm was coming, and it would soon hit her heart in a way she wasn't ready for. What Ayanda didn't know was that Mama Aziza wasn't just planning to stop the wedding. She was preparing to humiliate her in a way no one would forget. The sun rose gently over the village of Mbenga, casting a soft golden light across the rooftops and red soil. But this was no ordinary morning. There was a special energy in the air, one filled with joy, music, and high expectation. People from neighboring villages had started arriving since dawn, all gathering to witness the long-awaited engagement of Ayanda and Tajiri Okonkwo. Women carried pots on their heads. Laughter rang through the streets, and drums echoed like thunder, signaling that something grand was about to take place. The village square came alive. Songs filled the air, traditional tunes that had been sung for generations. Children ran barefoot, tossing flower petals and chasing each other between the guests. The elders sat under the great baobab tree, their faces calm but observant, ready to give their blessing. The atmosphere was pure celebration. It was more than just an engagement. It felt like a moment written by fate. Ayanda stepped forward quietly, and as she did, people turned to look. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. Heads turned, eyes widened. There was something powerful about the way she walked, the way she held herself. It was dignity. It was grace. It was the kind of confidence that only comes from within. Even those who had doubted her in the past couldn't help but admire her in that moment. Tajiri stood nearby, surrounded by cousins and friends, but his eyes searched only for her. And when he saw Ayanda, he didn't look away. He made his way through the crowd and gently took her hand in his. "You've never looked more like the woman I prayed for," he whispered. She smiled softly. They said nothing more, but their silence spoke volumes. You could feel the love between them. It was pure, honest, and strong. The ceremony began with drums, claps, and the sound of ancestral horns. Elders offered prayers and poured drinks in the soil for the ancestors. Offerings were exchanged, baskets of food, handmade gifts, symbolic items representing unity. Everyone played their part. There were songs of blessing, dances of joy, and chants that echoed across the sky. The entire village stood together, proud and happy to witness this love story unfold in front of them. Ayanda knelt with calm respect before the elders, answering questions with wisdom far beyond her years. Tajiri joined her, declaring his commitment to honor and protect her no matter what life brought. Cheers erupted. Children clapped. Even strangers who barely knew them smiled, feeling like they were part of something beautiful. Then came a silence, a shift in the air. From the edge of the crowd, Mama Aziza arrived. Her entrance was quiet, but her presence was loud. People turned to look, unsure of what to expect. She stood tall, her expression unreadable. Some thought she had come to offer her blessing at last. Others weren't so sure, but one thing was clear. Her heart wasn't celebrating. Still, the ceremony moved forward. For Ayanda and Tajiri, this was their moment. They stood side by side, hands tightly held, eyes locked, as if nothing could come between them. For a brief time, it felt like love had won. The singing, the dancing, the laughter, it was all for them. A day the village would remember forever. But what no one knew was that in the middle of all this joy, a storm was quietly brewing. And before the sun would set, everything was about to change. Ayanda stood frozen, her face stinging, but her soul even more. Everything felt like a dream that had suddenly twisted into a nightmare. The entire village square was dead silent. No drums, no voices, no laughter, just silence, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Eyes that had once looked at her with warmth were now wide in shock, unsure where to look or what to say. Some women covered their mouths in disbelief. Children clung to their mothers. The elders, who had just been offering blessings, looked at one another in confusion and shame. This was not tradition. This was not honor. It was something else, something ugly. Tajiri's voice cracked as he stood between his mother and Ayanda, shielding her like a wall. "Mama, you've gone too far," he said, his voice shaking. But Mama Aziza was unmoved. Her stare was cold, sharp, like a knife that had already done its cutting. "I will not stay silent while my son is blinded by a girl with no name, no legacy," she said. Her words rang out over the silent crowd, slicing through the tension. Ayanda's mother, standing at the edge of the gathering, looked like she had aged 10 years in a moment. Her hands trembled at her sides, but she didn't speak. She knew her daughter was strong, stronger than most, but no mother wants to see her child hurt this way. Ayanda took a slow breath. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She looked around at the faces, some filled with pity, others with guilt, and a few with silent support. Her eyes were not angry. They were calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm has broken something inside you. This was meant to be a blessing, she said quietly. But now, the truth of hearts has shown itself. No one dared interrupt her. She turned to the elders and bowed slightly. I thank you for your time and your prayers, but I cannot stay where I am not welcome. Then she looked at Tajiri, her eyes soft but steady. Love should never cost a person their dignity. Tajiri's hands reached for hers, but she stepped back gently. It was clear now. This wasn't just a slap from his mother. It was a line drawn in front of the entire village. A test, a choice. And even though his heart ached, Tajiri knew Ayanda's strength could not be begged or bought back. As she walked away, the crowd slowly parted to let her through. The drummers lowered their eyes. Women whispered in hushed tones. Some of the elders looked ashamed to have allowed such disgrace under their watch. The celebration, once alive with joy and music, had turned into a moment people would talk about for years, but not with laughter. Behind her, Tajiri stood frozen, watching her go, while Mama Aziza crossed her arms as if victorious. But even she could not ignore the weight in the air, the heavy silence of a village that had just witnessed something unforgivable. And as Ayanda disappeared from sight, her back straight and steps slow, the people knew one thing for sure. This story was far from over. The moment hung heavy in the air. Every eye was on Ayanda, waiting, watching, unsure of what she would do next. The sting of the slap was still fresh, her cheek slightly red, but she didn't flinch. Her lips stayed shut, her body still. It was as if time had stopped around her. There were no screams, no wild emotions, just silence. That silence, so calm and controlled, made the villagers more uneasy than if she had shouted. A single tear threatened to fall, but she didn't let it. Her eyes were glossy, full of pain and disbelief, but she held it all inside. She had just been humiliated by the very woman who was supposed to become her family. Yet, she didn't lower herself. Her pride, her strength, and her spirit stayed untouched. The crowd that once celebrated now stood frozen, unsure how to respond to what had just unfolded. Then, she took a slow step back. Her eyes scanned the people, some looking away in shame, others still shocked. Her gaze stopped briefly on Tajiri, whose face was full of regret and helplessness. But Ayanda didn't speak to him. She didn't plead for understanding. She simply looked past him, toward the open road beyond the village. Then, in a soft, clear voice that still cut through the silence like a blade, she said, "The spirits see everything. That is enough for me." Those few words carried more power than anything else that could have been said. It wasn't anger. It wasn't spite. It was truth. Deep, ancient truth. The kind that reminded everyone watching that no injustice goes unseen. That dignity doesn't need revenge to feel whole. Her voice was calm, but it shook the soul of every person there. With her head held high, Ayanda turned away. She didn't rush, didn't stumble. Her steps were slow, graceful, and full of quiet defiance. She passed by the decorations that now looked like a cruel joke. The gifts, the smiles, the songs, all had vanished. In their place was an uncomfortable silence and the sound of her fading footsteps. No one dared stop her. Not the elders, not the children, not even Tajiri. They all just watched as she walked away, not from just a ceremony, but from the life she was supposed to begin. A life she had dreamed about, planned for, prayed for. But in that moment, she chose herself. She chose peace over approval, dignity over drama. Her mother, standing in the distance, slowly followed after her, silent, proud, and heartbroken. Ayanda didn't look back. There was nothing left for her behind. No apology would erase what was done. No words could cover the sting of public humiliation. So she walked, away from the crowd, away from judgment, and toward her own peace. The villagers remained rooted, not speaking, not moving. The only sound was the soft rustling of the wind and the quiet beat of retreating footsteps. And though she left in silence, her departure echoed loud. It echoed in the minds of everyone who had stayed quiet. It echoed in the heart of Tajiri, who had failed to protect her. And it would echo for a long time. Because sometimes true strength isn't in staying and fighting. It's in walking away without losing your soul. Tajiri stood frozen, his hands still trembling from the shock of what had just happened. The joy that had filled his chest only moments ago was now crushed under a wave of shame and heartbreak. He stared at the path Ayanda had just taken, watching as the woman he loved disappeared beyond the trees. Her steps quiet but powerful. He wanted to run after her, call out her name, beg her to stop, but his feet wouldn't move. Guilt weighed him down like chains. The crowd had started to whisper. Some people turned away in discomfort. Others stared at him, waiting to see what he would do. His mother, Mama Aziza, stood tall and firm beside him, but he didn't look at her. He couldn't. Her slap hadn't just landed on Ayanda's face. It had broken something deep within him, something sacred, something that could never be undone. Finally, he found his voice, raw and shaking. "You disgraced a woman of honor, Mama," he said loudly, his eyes never leaving the road Ayanda had taken. His words cut through the silence, and all murmurs stopped. "Ayanda is not beneath us. She is better than all of us, especially today." His voice cracked, but he didn't care. The truth needed to be said. Mama Aziza's expression shifted, but she said nothing. She didn't expect her son to speak against her. The elders looked down in awkward silence, and some of the villagers nodded slowly, beginning to understand the weight of what had happened. But Tajiri didn't wait for approval. He didn't need applause. He just needed Ayanda. Without another word, he turned and ran, past the chairs, past the food, past the memories of what should have been the happiest day of his life. He ran down the path she had taken, his eyes scanning the trail, hoping, praying to see her walking in the distance. But she was gone, completely gone. He asked the women outside the village if they'd seen her. He begged the children nearby if they'd noticed which way she went. He even walked to the old well where she used to sit and think, hoping she might be there. But no one had seen her. It was like the wind had taken her away. Hours passed. The sky began to darken, and still, there was no sign of Ayanda. Tajiri's clothes were dusty, his feet sore, but he didn't stop searching. The only thing louder than his heartbeat was the regret pounding in his head. He should have done more. He should have protected her. He should have spoken sooner. As night fell, he returned to the village empty-handed. The celebrations were long forgotten. The drums had gone silent, and he stood in the same place she had been slapped, haunted by the echo of her final words. "The spirits see everything. That is enough for me." Now he understood. She didn't leave because she was weak. She left because she was strong enough to walk away from anything that didn't honor her. And now, Tajiri could only hope he'd be strong enough to find her again, and worthy enough if he ever did. 1 year passed, and the village of Mbenga had long returned to its quiet rhythm. The story of the engagement that ended in disgrace still lingered in hushed conversations, especially among the women who once praised Ayanda's grace. Some said she moved far away. Others believed the spirits had taken her to a better life, but no one truly knew, until the name Ayanda Mwal began making waves far beyond the village borders. In Lugambo City, posters and social media posts began to circulate, all showing a smiling woman standing before a bright orange gate with bold white letters, Sauti Academy. Behind those gates were dozens of laughing, confident girls who had once been forgotten, orphaned, abandoned, silenced, and now they were learning to dream again, to speak boldly, to write, dance, lead, all because of the woman who once walked away in silence. Ayanda had returned, not to the village, but to the world, stronger and louder than ever. She had built the academy with her own hands, using the little savings she had and the help of generous strangers who believed in her cause. Every corner of the academy whispered stories of healing. The classrooms were filled with colors and books. The dorms were safe places where girls slept without fear. And at the heart of it all was Ayanda, now no longer just a teacher, but a leader, a protector, and an inspiration. When reporters asked how it all began, she smiled gently and said, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your true voice." Her story caught fire. News articles called it "From Slapped to Queen, Ayanda's Mission." People across the country were touched by her journey. Her calm dignity on that engagement day had now become a symbol of strength. But Ayanda didn't seek fame. Her focus stayed on the girls, each one with a past of pain, just like hers. She taught them how to hold their heads high, how to walk with grace even when the world turned against them. She told them, "You are not what happened to you. You are who you decide to become." And slowly, the academy became more than a school. It became a movement Visitors traveled from all over to see the woman who had once walked away from humiliation and instead walked into purpose. Parents who had abandoned their daughters now came to apologize. Donors offered to build more wings for the academy. Ayanda accepted everything with the same quiet humility that had once stunned a village into silence. Back in Mbenga, even Mama Aziza heard the whispers. Whispers of the girl she once dismissed now being honored across cities. A girl who had left without a word, but returned through every headline, every changed life, every child's smile. Ayanda had not just survived the shame of that day, she had transformed it. She didn't return to prove herself. She simply rose so high, the world had no choice but to see her. It was a quiet morning in Mbenga when news spread that Mama Aziza had fallen seriously ill. Her body had grown weak, her voice faint, and the village healer could do little to help. The illness was sudden, but it hit hard. Tajiri rushed to her side, fear in his eyes. Despite everything that had happened, she was still his mother. The local doctor examined her, and after a long pause, gave his advice. She needed advanced care. There was a clinic in Lugambo known for treating women with great care and skill. It was the best chance she had. There was no time to waste. Tajiri arranged for her to be taken to the city. The journey was long and tiring. When they arrived at the Lugambo Women's Clinic, staff quickly moved Mama Aziza inside. The clinic was calm, clean, and filled with a gentle energy. The nurses welcomed her warmly, unaware of who she was. But fate, as it always does, had its own plans. In the heart of the clinic, a woman walked through the hallways with quiet authority. Her smile comforted patients, and her presence brought peace to even the most worried families. That woman was Ayanda Mwal. Not only had she founded the Sauti Academy, but she had also partnered with this very clinic, helping women get the treatment and dignity they deserved. She was reviewing patient files when a nurse mentioned a new critical case brought from Mbenga. Something about the name made her stop. She asked to see the file, and there it was, Aziza Okonkwo. Her breath caught, just for a second, but instead of anger, something else stirred inside her. She didn't hesitate. With calm steps, she walked toward the room. Inside, Mama Aziza lay still, eyes closed, unaware of who was about to walk in. Tajiri sat beside her, holding her hand. He looked up when he heard the door open, and his heart nearly stopped. Ayanda stood there, graceful and poised. For a moment, no one spoke. Time felt frozen, just like the day she had walked away from the village. Tajiri stood quickly, unsure of what to say. Ayanda, he whispered, but she simply raised her hand gently, signaling him not to speak. She walked over to Mama Aziza and looked down at the woman who had once slapped her across the face in front of an entire village. The same woman who had called her unworthy. But Ayanda saw not an enemy, only a mother who now needed help, and Ayanda had always helped those in need. The nurses followed her lead as she gave instructions, her voice calm and confident. She made sure Mama Aziza received the best care, personally checking on her treatment. The universe, in its quiet wisdom, had brought them face to face again. But this time, Ayanda held the power, and she chose to use it with grace. Not revenge, not pride, just healing. Mama Aziza's eyes fluttered open slowly. The room was quiet, filled with the soft hum of medical machines. For a moment, she was confused, unsure of where she was. Her gaze moved around the room, and then it landed on the one face she never expected to see again. Ayanda stood at her bedside, calm and gentle, holding a small glass of water. At first, Mama Aziza thought she was dreaming. Her heart tightened in her chest, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Her voice caught in the weight of memories. Shame, regret, guilt. Everything came crashing back like a flood. The day she slapped Ayanda, the words she said, the silence that followed. Ayanda leaned forward, helping her sip water before placing the glass back on the table. She didn't speak yet, she just watched, her expression soft but unreadable. The room felt heavy with emotions too big for words. Tears slipped down Mama Aziza's cheeks as she reached out with a trembling hand. Her voice was a whisper, choked and broken. "Forgive me, I was blinded by pride." The words were heavy, but true. It wasn't just pride, it was fear, tradition, and the belief that status mattered more than heart. She had misjudged Ayanda, and the weight of that mistake had haunted her every day since. Ayanda didn't pull away. She gently placed her hand on Mama Aziza's shoulder, the touch warm and full of strength. She looked into her eyes, and with a voice that carried both pain and peace, she said, "Healing is for everyone, even the ones who once hurt us." In that moment, something shifted. The past didn't disappear, but it softened. The walls that had been built with anger and misunderstanding started to crumble. Mama Aziza wept openly, not just from sickness, but from the overwhelming grace being shown to her. Grace she knew she didn't deserve. Tajiri, who had been standing silently in the corner, wiped his eyes. He had dreamed of this moment, but never imagined it would come like this. His mother, humbled. Ayanda, rising not with revenge, but with compassion. The nurse quietly stepped in to check on the patient, but paused at the door, sensing something sacred was unfolding. She watched for a moment, then left without a word, allowing the moment to breathe. Ayanda stayed for a while, making sure Mama Aziza was comfortable. She didn't bring up the past. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was a message, stronger than any scolding or speech. And as the sun poured softly through the hospital window, lighting the room in gold, Mama Aziza closed her eyes, not from weakness this time, but in peace. Forgiveness had found its way into the room, and with it, redemption. Tajiri stood quietly outside the clinic, his heart racing. He had followed every whisper, every clue, and finally found her. When he stepped inside and saw Ayanda, time seemed to pause. She looked different, stronger, more confident, but her eyes were the same. The woman he loved had become even more than he had imagined. Ayanda turned, surprised to see him. Their eyes locked, and for a moment neither spoke. Then, Tajiri stepped closer and softly said, "I never gave up on you." She didn't respond right away. Her face was calm, unreadable, but there was something in her gaze, something soft, something forgiving. Tajiri could feel it. Later, as Mama Aziza recovered, she reached out to Ayanda with trembling hands. Her voice was weak, but honest. "You are the daughter I never knew I needed," she whispered. "If you still have space in your heart, I give you my full blessing." The village soon buzzed with excitement. This time, there were no whispers of shame, only cheers of joy. The wedding was announced, and the preparations began. Everyone wanted to witness the union of two souls who had faced storms and still found their way back to each other. On the wedding day, Ayanda walked through the village with grace and pride. The same people who once stood in silence now clapped, danced, and sang her name. She was no longer just the kind village teacher. She was a woman of honor, a woman of strength. When she reached Tajiri, their hands met, and the past melted away. Their love, once wounded, was now whole. And as the sun set over Mbenga, the village celebrated, not just a wedding, but a story of love restored, of dignity reclaimed, and of healing that touched every heart.